All right. Thank you, Star, for the introduction. As Star said, my name's John. I do product marketing here at Instana, and I'm going to be kicking off the presentation today. Franz, do you want to quick introduce yourself before we get started?
Yeah, sure. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for the introductions. As already introduced, my name is Franz Schubert. I work at Giant Swarm. Giant Swarm is a company that operates Kubernetes and the cloud native stack for customers like Adidas, Vodafone, Deutsche Telekom, and others. We follow the principle of automating everything that we are likely to do at least twice. That's why we actually, John and I came up with the idea of talking about automation in this space. And I'll be sharing some insights on how we use automation to manage Kubernetes at scale across all customers with hundreds of clusters. So yeah, actually, I think there might be some aspects even, at least considering the poll, there are some people that actually run Kubernetes across multiple projects in production. They might have already invested heavily in automation, but I think there might be some good insight there too.
Perfect. All right. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started here with our presentation. So for several years now, technology has been drastically changing the way we as organizations do business. So in order to keep up with the accelerated pace of change, every company, regardless of the industry they are in, is going through some sort of kind of digital transformation. Because of this, there have been three major impacts to our way of doing business. We are being asked to increase our deployment frequency with continuous integration, continuous deployments, automated testing, and doing things like canary deployments to ensure we're not negatively impacting large swaths of our customer base. So with this, technology organizations are doing everything they can to automate each and every step of their build and release pipelines. So this has led us to be in a situation where deployments occur so fast, it's difficult to tell which ones are making things better, which ones are making things worse. And we also have the issue of services often behaving different in production environments than they do in test environments. So this change has brought about increased technical complexity. To meet the ever faster deployment frequencies, we need to provide our teams with new technologies and platforms. As organizations move away from monoliths and service-oriented architectures and move towards cloud-native microservices, running on containers and Kubernetes, the technological complexity grows exponentially. From these new tools, we are being inundated with data that is nearly impossible to make sense of. When something goes wrong, finding the root cause just got exceedingly more difficult to decipher, as we're unable to determine all of the dependencies across our distributed applications. Now, all of this is happening at the same time that we're also revamping our technical organizations to be more productive. So developers and operation teams require broader tooling adoption, but they've been limited by the fact that the current tools are built for experts only. You add on top of that developers are being asked to support their own code in production without having all of the operational experience needed. And you can start to see where new issues are being introduced to our teams. So, as I mentioned, these changes have been going on for a while now, but now in the midst of our change, we've been thrown a new challenge. Right? The world we have been working in has changed overnight and is continuing to rapidly change. So even though we have been going through this digital transformation journey for quite some time now, our current reality is forcing us to kick these initiatives into high gear. No matter where you were in this journey, you're now needing to accelerate the pace of change even further or even faster. So, why is that? Well, lots of things have rapidly changed. The home office is now the standard operating procedure for most people, especially for those people in technology-based roles. To support this, we've seen large increases in the sales of new laptops or webcams, VPN devices, online meeting tools, collaboration tools, the list goes on and on. Every retail business has had to adjust to a mostly e-commerce-based selling motion, meaning companies that were further down their digital transformation journeys were better able to kind of quickly shift focus. Those that were not are having to play catch up as fast as possible. Even like your mom and shop kind of restaurants have had to change their business model to provide takeout food online. So All of it, and this isn't just happening right in our work lives. We have kids stuck at home doing distance learning for the first time. We have people social isolating that are looking for new kind of like digital ways to stay connected to the world or to their families, their friends. And while parts of these changes will start to be like lessened as as countries and states begin and continue to reopen large parts of their respective economies, many of these changes are here to stay and will become part of the new normal going forward. So, like, kind of as an example of the new normal, we can look at the home office. There will be a large portion of the workforce that just does not return to a normal office setting after the pandemic is over. This is in no small part due to the fact that employers are realizing that their employees have been able to shift to remote work without a major impact to productivity. And as an added benefit, they will be able to significantly reduce their office footprint, saving thousands of dollars per employee. Not to mention the fact that employees will not be in a hurry to start making long commutes again or to quickly get back to standing in crowded train cars. So what this means is that many of the current projects to digitize work resources for better remote working experiences will be continuing far into the future. So where does this leave us? Well, like now more than ever, the saying, innovate fast or die slow, rings true. Business owners need faster innovation. End users are demanding more from their vendors and applications. They are more dependent upon digital services with remote work, and they also have much higher expectations. As companies are looking to cut costs, they are scrutinizing the value and ROI they are getting from all of their tooling, all of their platforms, and all of their services. And as a reminder, this is about driving new innovations and experiences for our customers. Or as Robert Rice notated in his article, digital transformation is no longer an option. Simply digitizing the traditional processes does not work. We need to use technology to do things in a different and better way, and that is what digital transformation is all about. In order to succeed in this new environment, organizations will have to adapt quickly. The ones that do so will continue to succeed. There's just one more issue. Even though the mandate is very clear, innovate faster, we're being asked to do this with fewer resources. The only way we will be successful driving innovation with fewer resources is to ensure we are eliminating as many non-value generating activities as we can. This in turn will ensure that our most valuable resources are spending the majority of their time working on value generating or revenue generating activities. Making investments and eliminating the non-value generating activities will pay far more dividends than trying to squeeze and pressure our developers and operators to do more than they're capable of. We should be focused on eliminating the manual, laborious tasks that currently take up large portion of our DevOps team's time. For example, infrastructure configuration, coding for performance monitoring, or manually investigating the root cause of incidents. In turn, your teams will be able to focus on innovation, or writing new applications and services, improving customer experience, which also improves customer retention rates. But obviously, if these things were simple to accomplish, we wouldn't have waited until there was a major impacting event to kind of really kick this into high gear. But with that being said, we do need to meet these challenges. So how are we going to rise to the occasion? And to answer this very question, I'm going to go ahead and hand the mic over to Franz and give us some tips to help us meet the challenges. Franz, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, John. Yeah, so actually, we're in a time of change, and as John pointed out, we are actually facing faster deployment frequencies and the complexity that doesn't go away, but is actually then moved into the infrastructure layer and the DevOps mantra of running and build. You run what you build. So basically, there are aspects that hit us. But actually, I would like to take a little step back, and we actually have lots of these discussions actually have come out of the technology space, but yeah, there actually is a business driver behind this, and the business driver is what John just pointed out, is the change in our working habits, but also the need to adapt to a very fast-paced environment that we are facing, and actually that has accelerated now through this pandemic. So if we actually look at the business side, business stakeholders actually they have got new expectations towards the development teams. One naturally is that software development and software actually is instrumental to every business nowadays. There are only very, very few exceptions that we can find throughout the world. And if we actually look at the speed at which development happens and software development happens and new services happen, then one key aspect of this is that software is developed by the development teams, and you actually only have a certain amount of resources available that you either can or even can use for a certain task, but even get for a certain task. So speaking to a big automotive supplier, just 2 years back, they basically said we could hire 2,000 new developers every month just to keep up with the work, but it's just impossible to find them. So I think the more and more businesses focus on developing software and applications, it actually is important for them to really have their teams focus on whatever drives value forward for them, and in many cases that's the innovation that they want to deliver to the market. So the more I can actually have the development team focus on value generating elements is something that really helps them to advance in a competitive environment. Another aspect naturally is that if you actually think of how the software was developed many, many years back, you actually kind of spec'd and sketched out what a final product would look like, and then you developed it and brought it to the market, but that in many cases actually didn't meet the expectations. So that's where all the agile trend actually has evolved, and really understanding how can you develop a solution together with a client by having fast and frequent deployments, making sure that really these the product that you're developing matches the customer expectations. And and naturally, the faster you can move, the more market opportunity you can capture for yourself. And that's something that, if you can bring out MVPs, minimal viable products, within a very short period of time, then that naturally helps you understand the market, see if it accepts the product, but most importantly, actually to fail early, to make sure that you don't invest money in something that will never fly. And then there are two aspects that business stakeholders actually learned that the cloud can provide, which is the higher scalability. We're in a more volatile environment, so the technology needs to scale up and down according to the demand and the needs in the market. And naturally, we actually are used to having our services available at any time. We pick up the phone nearly as the first thing in the morning and put it down the last thing at night. So we are just digitally connected all the time. So if something doesn't work or there's a downtime, then we actually get worried, upset, start tweeting about it. That's something that where companies actually are expecting to be available around the clock more and more at a higher rate. But still, that actually needs to happen while supporting agility and change. And I think that's where the technology needs to and the technology side needs to understand what the business requirements are, but then needs to find their answers towards that. And one element of the answer naturally is to come up with the very agile development teams where you've got the product owner and let's say 6, 7, 8 people around that that can then really develop new products and services in a very agile fashion. So they actually build it, they deploy it, and then they measure how it's been used, and they learn, and really repeating that cycle, making sure that from a technology aspect, you can really you really need to get a hang out of doing these frequent deployments, so you can really understand where the market is developing, and and then iterate according to the market demand. That's something that really has taken quite some energy for most companies to really come up with a continuous integration and deployment automation that then feeds into the different aspects of delivering a product and service that is highly requested. But to do that for very small teams, you naturally need to have microservice architecture in place, where you can then deploy these services independently, and really provide central services to different teams, so they don't have to redevelop, but then really have these teams work and deploy things independently. And to be able to do that, you actually can't have these handover processes that you had in the past, where you basically had to transfer something over to a test department, and then a production or operations department that then could take care of these different services. That's where the DevOps model came in, where you actually have the where you've got the cycle of you build it, you run it, so you actually start developing, and then you take ownership. So you actually deploy it, you monitor it very importantly, so you actually take care of the whole life cycle of this service all by yourself. And you can't do that if you actually have to manage as a small team, manage something like that end to end. And that's where the big trend to containers actually has evolved, where you basically abstract tons of let's say technology, networking technology and security technology and whatever, into the infrastructure layer, and provide that to the different teams within that can then run their microservices and containers. So that's basically how that developed. I guess it's not new to most of you, but we actually have some in here that actually have the beginning of their journey. So I just want to make sure that this is fully understood. So if you actually then continue with that and really drive the microservices forward, and some of you might have already seen that it's basically the microservice Death Star, where you've got all kinds of different microservices that you need to manage. And if you actually would do that manually, it would be a nightmare. You've got all these different microservices around you, then need to make sure that you understand the dependencies between them. You need to install monitoring for them, security, and all these different things. And that's where basically sets the foundation for Kubernetes. Kubernetes is the basis for a lot of automation around this microservice technology, making sure that you can really really benefit from the cloud native approach, and naturally from the business expectations side, fulfill these business expectations as we went through before. So if we look at Kubernetes, let's start on the left-hand side. Typically, you actually have the physical infrastructure and the virtualization in that area. Physical infrastructure being the servers, naturally, electricity and everything, the different CPUs and memory and storage and so on, and then that's naturally virtualized, so you can actually make use out of the hardware as much as possible, and then you've got Kubernetes installed on top of that, where you then basically can spin off different clusters, and on the clusters then naturally you've got your nodes and your pods that then run the different containers. Within these containers you can then have your different apps that you can install basically as part of different elements, either part of security monitoring or even special services, if it's Kafka or whatever, that then allow you to do certain elements, but then you build your microservices on top of that. But that's just the technology view. There's a very, very important aspect, which is the service aspect. So understanding how can you build and operate something that typically is perceived as technology only. So if you actually go into lots of discussions within companies, many of them actually start discussing about all the different functionalities that either Kubernetes upstream or the different distributions or whatever provide. But actually the most important aspect, and that's where you're spending most time and energy on, and actually losing your rate of innovation, is if you then perceive what you need to do on the operations side. Typically, either you're in a data center, then you're probably already very efficient in that area, or you use a cloud provider for the physical infrastructure and the virtualization environment. But then you naturally need to have a basic understanding of how to set up and provision different machines for these environments. And then you need to install a control plane for Kubernetes, which then basically manages the worker nodes. And you need to take care of security, making sure that everything is tightly secured, that you can actually also, in addition, install different apps on top of that then make sure that the containers are also secured and scanned. You actually have certain setups and controls to make it as reliable and fault tolerant as possible. Then you need to take care and think about monitoring, also issue a solution. If you find something, how do you isolate it? How do you find what the root cause is? And then naturally, that platform also needs to evolve. You've got lots of technology in there. So Kubernetes is not the only technology, naturally, as those who actually are running Kubernetes already know. There's Kubernetes, but then typical setups include include the database, etcd, and then you actually might need the CNIs, so network interfaces. You need ingress. You can have an Nginx or other ingress controllers. You might have a vault for your secrets. So there are many other tools that basically create the whole cloud native stack that you need to take care of and that you need to evolve to make sure that whatever use case you want to support really gets supported by the platform. And then there is a very important aspect, which is also something that at least we see in customers where there's a great need, is that there are development teams that actually are highly efficient if they get a recommendation and also guidance on how to use the underlying technology and infrastructure, how to design their microservices, and then that's what we see as enablement, where basically there are certain aspects, so not everything in the cloud native space is relevant to your development of microservices, but there are many questions that you can ask, and there are many opinions and much development happening in that space. So that's where it actually becomes very important to have central areas of knowledge that actually are responsible for sharing their insight and giving recommendation to the development teams to make sure that they can be as efficient and successful as possible. And on top of that, naturally, you then have your project teams that take care of your development of the microservices and running them, but also you typically have some people that have the connection to the platform team that then carry the enablement into the different teams, make sure that they evaluate new technologies that the platform may not provide, certain apps, for example, that might not be provided by a central team. And you can think about how you actually can support these different teams in the best possible way. So as I said, either you've got a well-oiled data center team that runs your data center for you, or you use a cloud provider that is, highly scalable and can provide these services on demand and invoice you on a per second or per minute basis. But then you actually can decide to run the whole Kubernetes stack yourself, or have a cloud provider run it, or have an internal team take care of all these aspects in there. And on top of that, you may have a platform team that then basically works as the gateway for your project teams to make sure that they are empowered and help that. But that's something that you need to decide, is basically what resources do you actually have, which people actually would like to develop in certain areas. Does it make sense to run it yourself, or does it make sense to consume it? And that's something I will also cover in the next couple of slides to help you actually make a good choice in that respect. So if you actually then look at monitoring and issue resolution as two aspects that I would like to pick out, because we're here together with Instana, making sure that we cover the aspects that are relevant to you. So there's the whole stack, and you can actually think about establishing security, reliability, monitoring, issue resolution end to end. So from the data center up to the project teams. I would like to focus on monitoring issue resolution right now. That's where Instana is really great at. That's where they actually can pick up data from the data center level and also from the application level, integrate that into the monitoring. They actually have a single agent that then automatically discovers these services. It can include external data if you have your own setup for monitoring, either from a data center perspective, or you actually have it installed already on some apps, or even the Kubernetes layer, and that actually allows you to really have an end-to-end view from the very bottom to the very top. So once you actually identify, and that's what part of the alerting does, is once you've got the monitoring hooked up from end to end, and you then identify an issue, then you can really go inside and understand what the real root cause is. So you actually don't waste time with symptomatic issues and events, but you actually really can drill down to the root cause. And that's also something that Instana does very, very nicely, that it actually compiles everything into a single incident. And then you actually have a full incident report attached to that, where you can go through all the different layers and see what the real root cause is. And that actually helps you resolve these, the root cause effectively, and make sure that you actually don't waste time going after all the symptoms and removing them first before you actually get to the real source of the problem. So that's basically the setup that customers typically have if they run Kubernetes. And let's go and look at what automation looks like in this space. I typically refer to this as the Kubernetes lifecycle, which we establish within our company, that actually helps us manage the Kubernetes deployments for all our customers, also take them on a journey of what we provide, but also what they actually need to take care of. And I'll start off with the installation bit. That's where we typically go in and install the control plane, and where basically you've got the vanilla Kubernetes, naturally the upstream Kubernetes, and let's say we typically install about 30 components on top of that to make sure we cover the cloud native stack and enable the use cases that our customers have. We can naturally always extend that. We're constant discussions with our customers on what they want to do and how we can best support them. So that's where we then install new apps. But these are elements that you basically can do all by yourself, or we can do that for you. The most important aspect here is that, and I've been talking to more and more customers that basically want to establish Kubernetes as a common platform within their company, that when they actually want to install a new cluster, they actually start building automation around this. And typically they either use Ansible or Terraform for that. They actually then create scripts that basically do the provisioning for them and consider all kinds of governance aspects. The only challenge is so once something is set up, you actually need to make sure that you've got something that checks up in, that something is at a state and still at the state. What is if you actually upgrade a component or a team upgrades something within their environment, because that's what they need to do, or they can upgrade it, and then things become out of control, and that's where we actually basically have set up an automation. So basically, we run Kubernetes on Kubernetes. We apply the same Kubernetes principles to our setups with the monitoring and recovery and managing of all these different Kubernetes clusters for our customers across different teams, naturally with hard isolation, and that allows us to actually really become very, very efficient in managing lots of clusters across all kinds of different cloud providers, data centers, and so on. I think one very important aspect is that we invested very early in operators. So we actually, and that's something that if you actually haven't done that so far and are running Kubernetes yourself, you might need to consider that because it's just becoming the standard, de facto standard within Kubernetes to handle automation. That's something that we actually have invested like 6 years of development into creating all kinds of automation, because we actually don't want to waste time or end up with any different setups. As you can imagine, if we actually had a different setup with each and every customer, that actually would become really, really challenging. The next aspect is security, and you might wonder why that's a separate step in the whole process. It's very, very important for us because we actually work in, let's say, high secure environments where customers actually expect that everything is tied down to the high security requirements. And that's where you need to think about automation as well, because any setup that you might choose typically is insecure from the start, and that's where you then need to think about how to establish robust access and pod security policies from the very beginning, and naturally then have certain configurations that you have to find to establish governance across your whole Kubernetes space across your company, making sure that no team can start a cluster without securing it tightly. And then also the apps that you install on top of that, many apps won't work if you actually have robust access and pod security policies activated. So that's where we basically have also developed a app platform that allows you to easily install these apps. Everything is set up in advance, so it actually is already secured, and then you can easily install it without any adjustments. That's what we have done in terms of security and automating that security, and that's what customers really appreciate a lot. If they don't have to worry about the security setup once they actually spin up a new cluster. The management aspect is something that's really important from a manageability aspect. As you can imagine, we could naturally get new employees for every customer and just solve a problem through a headcount, but that wouldn't allow us to be sustainable. So what we actually did here is to make sure, and this is part of automation, from a different angle, we actually made sure that all customers run on the same setup. So every use case actually gets integrated into the platform in a way that allows every customer to use it in the same way, and that allows you then to build, and everything that you build around it basically it pays into the automation that actually goes into the space. And and that's something that you might need to consider if you actually are running and managing Kubernetes for your single project. Over time, it actually will become a Babylon with all different teams managing different setups of Kubernetes. So having a central way of running Kubernetes and deploying new clusters, managing these, upgrading these is a very important aspect and requires a lot of automation. I think the point that we're doing, or a very great advantage of us working together with clients is that we actually don't have first, second, and third level support. All customers actually get access to the third level support, so the developers that actually run the platform and that have built it. And by doing that, we not only provide great service to the customers, but actually more importantly, the developers understand what needs and requirements customers have, so they can then build that into the automation. So if you actually have your own team that, your platform team that manages Kubernetes, make sure that they actually speak to the end customers and are in constant exchange with the teams, so they can better understand how to build automation around their Kubernetes that then supports different use cases and the different pain points. The next aspect is monitoring. That's where, you actually can invest a lot of time setting up everything. Really making sure that you register all new services. You might need to just install new agents for different technologies and so on and so forth. That's where it actually makes total sense to look at Instana, because they've got a single agent with sensors that automatically discover new services. And the great thing here is it actually goes down to 1 second granularity metrics, so you actually get alerts, and in a very fine-grained way that also helps in issue resolution, and you can actually trace every single request. So you've got you actually have full insight and access to your data and metrics to make sure that you actually can identify the root cause very, very quickly. And you naturally can then set up all kinds of alerting on top of that, and include all kinds of data sources. So that's something you might need to consider. We ourselves have a monitoring that alerts us 24/7. So that's what we do for our customers. Then a developer actually goes in and checks on the status. If there is something, we actually do a more post-mortem analysis of this. That's where the root cause analysis and support from Instana actually comes in. As I said, with full trace, all data in a single issue, and then you basically can understand where the problem actually has originated, do a full root cause analysis, and that's where a lot of help comes from, to understand. And I think that's another very important aspect is that you actually don't let any premature automation solve problems for you by just restarting the pod, and you're actually constantly run into the same problem. We actually have done this, and we do that about 500 to 600 times a year, that we do these post-mortem analysis. So whenever a customer runs into issue, we do this isolation and then figure out how we can basically programmatically resolve the issue, and also identify very early that if something's going wrong. This is also something that Instana does, is that you can fine-tune your alerting system, so you can make sure that basically you reduce the amount of false positives, and thereby can then get to a very reliable system without being a pain in the butt for your developers. And finally, the upgrade, that's where we do a lot of automation too, in terms of, but I think that's what other companies now have added as well. It's like draining the nodes, replacing the whole nodes, making sure that you basically have no time downtime upgrades. I think the one aspect here that helped us a lot is having fixed versions. So all components that are in a single version are all versioned, all configurations are versioned. So if you actually deploy a certain version, a Giant Swarm version of, of a set, let's say Kubernetes 17.1 and Calico and a flat car and whatever in a certain version, then basically whatever you deploy to your test system or to your development system, and you can verify that it runs, then also runs in production. So you can be very, very sure that this the same behavior that you see in the development or in the test environment will also be reflected in the production environment. So I actually hope I could give you some insights in terms of automation, what we are doing, also in terms of how it actually helps us to manage all these clusters and customers very, very efficiently. If there are any questions, just put them in the box. I'm more than happy to go into more detail. I actually have probably a final slide from my side, at least, which then talks about the different operations models. So typically, if you actually look at Kubernetes and how you can reap the benefits from Kubernetes through a high degree of automation and naturally having someone provide you with an infrastructure as a development team that you can just use. There are different approaches to do this, and one naturally is you can build everything yourself from scratch. That's what several companies have done. Shutterstock is one of these customers of ours that actually have done it for 2 years. They then decided that it actually doesn't help them differentiate from their competition by running it themselves. It doesn't provide any value and just creates pain. And that's why they basically asked us to take over Kubernetes from them. So basically, that's where we run Kubernetes for them, so they can then really focus on things that differentiate them. But there might be certain use cases where it may make total sense for your internal team to cover everything yourself. The whole projects are typically open source. Then you can actually add Instana to it as a part of the automation for monitoring and root cause analysis, which actually will empower your team to actually move a lot faster and understand how to become very reliable and also support the change that your development teams will need. Another aspect is that you can use a public cloud provider, be it AWS or Google or Microsoft Azure, one of the hyperscalers, Alibaba, where you basically then can use a Kubernetes solution that they provide, which actually can help you quick start your project really rapidly, which is why some customers actually use it. What you actually end up doing is that you basically have to run it yourself. You still have to run it yourself. So once you actually have a problem, you need to go inside and isolate the things, and you actually are very bound to the technology that they provide. So that's something you just need to keep in mind. So if you actually are thinking about supporting many different teams or different cloud providers, that's where you actually will see a duplicate investments in the same area for different cloud providers or for different teams. And that's what you need to just consider. Another aspect is you could go with distributions. Typically, they provide their solutions across different clouds, public and private clouds, so on-premise and on public clouds. Here you still have the challenge that you need to manage it yourself. So you need to get trained, onboarded, and so on and so forth. So on your journey to value, that actually you just need to cover more aspects all by yourself. And then there are providers like Giant Swarm that basically run Kubernetes for you. So basically, we've got a stack that has been in production for the last 4 years across hundreds of clusters. So we actually have great experience in that, and we also have dedicated resources that you can ask anytime in case of questions and so on and so forth, to make sure that the remaining element that you need to cover to provide a cloud native stack gets basically gets empowered to move really, really fast and help your development teams move very fast. On all levels, you can add Instana as a part of the automation that then helps you really figure out the current status of your applications, make sure that you're alerted when there's something going wrong, and then helps you in your root cause analysis to make sure that you can identify any issues and resolve them very, very efficiently. So I actually talked a little bit about Instana, but I think we actually have another slide, John, that actually will just give an overview to all those who actually haven't been too much in touch with
Instana. Yeah.
Is that
Thank
correct?
you. Thanks for taking us through all those great tips on automation. So now I'll just kind of quickly spend a couple minutes just quickly going through what it is specifically that Instana does, and then kind of follow that up with the Giant Swarm and Instana, how we work together to help you. So Instana is a fully automated application performance monitoring platform. It's designed from the ground up to work in your cloud native or microservices-based environments. But what does that actually mean for you, or what do we actually deliver to our customers? Well, as I said, Instana is fully automatic. So we automatically and continuously discover your full application stack. That means there's no need to manually add or write monitoring code, no manual configuration of any kind required. And this leads to being that there's no missing monitoring coverage, right? We also provide full observability with accurate real-time data. This is important for understanding how a system of services works together and the impact of component failure. Instana enhances traces with the information about the underlying service, application, and the system infrastructure using our dynamic graph. And then with that graph, we automatically create a dependency map so that users get a real-time understanding of how every component impacts every other component and service in your environment. The dynamic graph and the dependency map together kind of ensure that we're able to deliver the exact root cause analysis of any issue. So as Franz had mentioned, right, this Instana uncovers anomalous events and traverses the dependency map to find the root cause, as well as all of the related events, right? We then generate that single actionable alert that has all the related events correlated to the root cause. Instana makes all of the data we collect available to our users, so we're able to analyze it from any perspective that you deem necessary. It's kind of like an intuitive data analytics that covers all of the browser and backend trace details collected by Instana. So you can quickly filter every aspect of your data in an unlimited combination of ways, which helps you discover performance outliers, problem patterns, or like uniquely tagged traces. This empowers users to kind of define the bottlenecks in their applications before you have customer impact. And then finally, Instana provides a flexible way to create perspectives for the applications and or services that you care about. We strongly believe that application performance management should no longer be a tool just for the limited few experts that can understand it. So it's a core to what everybody does when it comes to software delivery and service operations. So what we're doing is we're democratizing access to application performance monitoring so that everyone has the data that they need to be successful. We've made it easy for developers or end users to create the perspectives they need to fully optimize their applications. So users can quickly cut through the complexity of their entire environment with fully customized views that show the targeted analytics, dashboards, and alerts that they care about. And then together, Giant Swarm and Instana really are like, focused on enabling your teams to innovate or to write better software faster. So Giant Swarm takes care of the cloud native infrastructure, so operating Kubernetes, the cloud native infrastructure for you, while also providing like a dedicated solution engineer to help answer any of your questions, or like you're saying, to kind of help do those postmortems. And then Instana automates the cloud native microservices based application monitoring. So together we're able to ensure your teams are spending less time on those non-value generating activities that we talked about. So we are ensuring that they're really focusing their time delivering value to your customers. Yeah, and that's kind of it for our presentation today. So I think we can now hand it back over to Star just to see if we have one or two questions we might be able to answer in our remaining time.
Yeah, great. We do have a few minutes for Q&A. If you haven't, please submit your questions in the question box. And if we don't get to your question today, we'll be sure to reach out to you directly. One question that came in was about Prometheus. Their opinion was that it is not a great monitoring solution due to the amount of manual effort, and they wanted your opinions on that.
Start with that. So it definitely, Prometheus does take a lot of manual effort to get set up and to get configured. It does do a good job once you have it set up and monitored. So I definitely wouldn't want to say that it's a bad monitoring solution. In fact, at Instana, part of our focus on open source software and cloud native technologies, we support Prometheus, so we integrate with Prometheus. If you've already have it set up and you're collecting metrics, especially if you have like custom metrics that you're getting from there, we're able to consume those into Instana and have them viewed within the rest of the information that we're gathering, kind of correlate those together so you get an even more holistic view of everything that's going on in your environment. But yes, it definitely requires that manual configuration that we're trying to eliminate with Instana through the automation and the automatic discovery of technologies. Franz, I believe you guys use Prometheus some internally, right?
Yeah, I think we run into Kubernetes in lots of customer installations because it's just a very, integral part of the CNCF community, and actually, as open source project is typically accompanied or a technology that accompanies Kubernetes. But yes, as you said, it's like you can do. There are people out there that actually install Kubernetes all by themselves and run it all by themselves, which is fine too. There might be certain use cases where it makes sense. If you've got a very predictable environment where you fine-tune things, then I think it might still be a good use case. If you're actually looking for speed and innovation, I think that's where Instana can provide quite some benefits.
Thanks. Another question was, how should we be thinking about Instana and how it differentiates from Datadog?
Question. So we think of like Datadog more as like a like a replacement for like a Netcool, kind of like a all-encompassing area of doing monitoring. But with that, again, there comes a lot of area for like manual configuration that you need to do. So at Instana, we provide a lot of the same things. We do infrastructure monitoring, end user monitoring, application performance monitoring. We give you the full analytics. And one of the things that we do differently is we do a full end trace for every single request that runs through your environment. And it's all included in the cost of the platform. So there's no additional cost for how many traces you have or how many spans that you have that you're collecting. And the same is true for the number of metrics. We pull in our granularity for metrics is for every 1 second. So we give you a really high level of granularity and give you full access to all of the data that's in there, not just for an extremely limited period of time like you might see in a Datadog. So really kind of similar technologies, but I think we diverge pretty well from each other. And then we're focused more heavily on the application performance monitoring, whereas Datadog is much more kind of at the infrastructure level.
Another question came in, is Giant Swarm, or if Giant Swarm only takes care of on-prem metal. Yeah, sorry, bare metal.
Bare metal, yeah.
I didn't know if I was reading it right.
No, it's, yeah. So basically, no, we actually take care of on-prem and public cloud. So what we actually do is we on-prem we actually go inside and we build on top of the infrastructure that is there, and we actually do the same in public cloud. And if there are projects that that actually would like to work together with us, we can always spin up trial clusters and give you the experience. What we do is we fully manage, so we actually make sure that we actually monitor it 24/7. We have got a dedicated solution engineer that goes into weekly meetings with you, understands what actually has happened in the past, understands current requirements, and then also develops plans on when to upgrade. We typically make that progress, that upgrade process as lean as possible to make sure that we actually can upgrade very, very frequently to the latest Kubernetes versions and so also related technology.
I think we have time for one more. A question came in: can I configure custom monitoring tasks? And then the follow-up to that was, for example, to see if my web service didn't consume JMS message and the reason for that.
First part of that question?
Yeah. Can I configure custom monitoring tasks?
Can you configure custom monitoring tasks? I'm going to say that I'll have to follow up on that question. I have not heard that exact term before.
Okay. And then last but not least, given your focus on APM, what is differentiation versus New Relic or App Dynamics?
What is the difference between Instana and App Dynamics and New Relic?
Yeah.
Well, I think you can look at it as kind of three different parts. So monitoring, originally when it was created, when App Dynamics and New Relic kind of were first getting started, we were still kind of moving from the monolithic applications into the service-oriented architectures. And with that, it's just a kind of a different kind of model of doing monitoring. So then it was okay to have a lot of configuration. It was okay to spend some time setting things up or having multiple agents per language that you're monitoring for, because you didn't change things as often as we do now with like the microservices based environments. So that's actually why Instana kind of was founded in the first place, was that the kind of older solutions weren't being very good, or weren't doing a very good job in the newer environments. And so Instana was created to do this all automatically, right? You install a single agent, it automatically starts monitoring your environment, checks to see all of the technologies you have running, automatically deploys the appropriate technology specific sensors to begin tracing and collecting metrics from all the solutions that you have in there. You don't have to configure anything, you don't have to update it. Anytime that you upgrade what you're working on, like if you move from one version of Docker to another, or if you upgrade from one Java version to another Java version, you don't have to make any change into the Instana agent or the sensors. We automatically detect those changes and start monitoring it for you. And then again, just the level of granularity. We collect a trace for every single request. We don't do any sampling. There's no partial traces, so you get a full end-to-end view of every single request going through your environment. And we also collect our metrics at the 1 second granularity, and we give you access to all of that data. So not only do we give you the root cause when there's an actual issue or an incident, anytime that a developer or anybody else wants to go in and just look for some places where there might be bottlenecks where they can create a better customer experience for their customers, they can go in and see where there's little areas where they can kind of optimize the application just by going through the whole set of data that we have in our analytics platform.
Well, thank you, Franz and John. Looks like we're at the end of our time. A link to view the on-demand webinar will be sent to you after this via email, but you can also visit our website to access the recording. Please check out our other upcoming webinars by visiting instana.com/webinars. Thank you all so much for joining us today, and we hope you have a great day.
Thank you very much, everyone.